Hello, my name is Ritonia, and I'm Bishop Suffragan for Armed Forces and Federal Ministries. And I'm so pleased to be with you today as we begin a series of podcasts on spiritual, mental, and practical suggestions to assist chaplains and community caregivers in navigating the challenges that we often face in our work. To care for those who in our communities who are suffering in many different levels. And so to assist us and offer professional expertise, we are joined today by the Reverend Dr. Janine Driscoll. Janine, it is great to have you here today with us. And Janine is a priest in the Episcopal Church, and she's got her PhD in counseling psychology. And she also chairs the pastoral response team in the Diocese of the Rio Grande. And she's a diocesan consultant on clergy wellness, and she maintains an independent practice of psychotherapy for couples and individuals in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Again, welcome. We're so glad that you're with us today. And today, we're going to be talking about anxiety. And I know that's something that is in the waters that we're swimming in these days. But before we get to specifics, Janine, about anxiety, I'd like to ask you, what are some of the spiritual underpinnings of anxiety? What kind of forms our sense of self and God that can affect how we are anxious or not?
Yeah. So images of God factor in, even for folks who are not practicing or associated with a faith tradition. How people see God, how people perceive God acting on them, in them, through them, in the world around them. There was a study shortly after the first several months of COVID, and this study looked at what seems to affect people's anxiety about COVID, about getting COVID, about friends, family. And what this study found is that folks who had more punitive or retaliatory images of God, or a God who's distant and uninvolved, you know, the grand clockmaker, those folks had more anxiety about either becoming sick with COVID or having friends and family get COVID. Folks who had images of God as more compassionate and merciful, those folks still had anxiety, but it was less intense. And so how we perceive God, right? Like we were talking about at breakfast, my nephew asking me that question when he was 4 or 5. How is God God?
What a question for a 4-year-old.
Yeah, really.
Remarkable.
Over peanut butter and jelly, right? And how is God God? That's something that we need to reflect on and get others to reflect on, because that is, how is God acting on us, in us, through us? How does our relationship, our image of this God, help us make sense of what's happening? Mm-hmm. That's foundational to life, and it's very foundational to the issues we're discussing today.
Well, when we think about anxiety, particularly for folks that may not have a really grounded faith tradition, can you talk a little bit of what just world theory might be and how it might affect those folks?
Yeah. I have been amazed over the years as a priest and a psychologist how folks subscribe without even being aware of it to this just world theory, in which if I do everything that I'm supposed to, if I do everything correctly and right and good, then nothing bad is going to happen to me. It's like they enter into a quid pro quo with God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And then when tragedy happens, oftentimes, instead of looking at the existential reality that tragedy happens, people begin to make attributions about why it's happening. And that just world theory trips them up, because if I've done everything right, then how do I account not just for the tragic or the traumatic, But how do I account for feeling so utterly helpless and unmoored, right? Because my framework has just been pulled out from under me.
That makes sense when we think about how people respond to the different crises in their life. You know, I'm wondering what type of things drive anxiety, and is there such a thing as good anxiety?
Yeah. So let's start with the second one first. Yeah. Anxiety, to a certain extent, you know, and there are graphs in Psych 101 books that y'all can look at, right? Anxiety and excitement, to a certain level, are the exact same physiologic processes. It is the exact same thing happening in our bodies, excitement, anxiety. It is the spin we put on it. It is the cognitive spin that we put on, oh, I've got butterflies in my stomach, you know, getting ready to do this. You know, I've never done this, Bishop. I've not done these videos. I got butterflies in my stomach, right? Anxiety, but that could also be excitement about doing this form of work. So if I can shift it from, oh, I'm anxious and what's going to happen, to, hey, this is neat. This is an exciting venture. See how it shifts it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. How we perceive a situation really can control the amount of anxiety that we might have.
Yeah.
Wow. So what are the symptoms? You know, you described the butterflies in this in your stomach, but what are some other things that might not be healthier ways that anxiety is manifested?
Yeah. So in general, we might think about it in three broad categories: cognitive, emotional, and body-based or physical. Right? So cognitive, folks will have anxiety-producing thoughts. They are ruminating on stuff that has happened, that will happen. You know, the what ifs, the what oughts, right? And they can spin entire narratives just off of one or two anxious thoughts.
And so they're not in the present when they're in this kind of state. Yep. Looking back or looking forward.
Yeah, spot on. You know, it's what if or what ought to have been rather than what is. Because you and I both know that the only place where we can make a difference, make a change, is in the here and now. And that's why it's so important to learn how to manage anxiety, because it's going to be there most likely, especially in our world today, right? And so if 1 in 5 people in the United States, and this was several years ago, with a CDC study, have anxiety, can you imagine what it is now? I bet it's more than 1 in 5. Right?
Probably 5 in 5 right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So part of anxiety is minding our mind, paying attention to paying attention. What thoughts am I thinking, and what impact do they have right here, right now on my well-being, my outlook, right? Emotional, nervousness, irritability, a sense of impending doom, right? A sense of heightened vigilance when there's nothing to be vigilant about, right? There are times that anxiety is totally appropriate because there is some incoming threat of some sort, some kind of danger. Our body is warning us. But when we go around with that sense of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? And there's nothing immediately threatening us, that's problematic. So folks may also have ruminations about, you know, what will happen, and then what will happen translates into nervousness, irritability, tension, right? In terms of physical, and that's just a few of the symptoms. In terms of physical, oftentimes folks will talk about fidgetiness, they'll talk about GI distress of some sort, right? You'll notice that some folks have difficulty focusing. Many times, folks have disrupted sleep. And as you know, one of the screening questions that has been asked for a long time in military clinics is, how is your nighttime sleep? How are you resting? Because that is a sidestep way of asking about what might be interfering with their sleep, which then gets to anxiety, which then might be about other traumatic events, right? So sleep is a very important indicator of what's happening for us. Rapid heartbeat, rapid heart rate, right?
Wow, these are, I mean, there's been one time or another where I experienced all of these different, manifestations of anxiety. Well, can you suggest some questions that spiritual caregivers should be asking folks that come in to visit them? Oftentimes, we're kind of the first line responders. They'll come to a clergy person before they'll go see mental health, or they won't even see mental health at all. So what kind of questions should we be asking as caregivers?
Yeah. Well, one of the first things, somebody comes in and says, hey, chaplain, I'm really upset. I'm really anxious. To not assume that one knows what that means. So to say, okay, well, when you're anxious, what happens for you?
That's a good question.
What are you experiencing right now that might be contributing to the anxiety? And then to say, it sounds like you may have had this for a while. So talk to me about the ways that you've managed it before that have been helpful. What's worked? And hearing that, because then we can build on that, which also invites the person to collaborate with us, right? And it helps us to identify some of their strengths, some of their resources, right? When you have anxiety, what makes it worse, right? And then after you start to get that kind of picture, then beginning to ask questions like, well, how do you make sense of this anxiety? What do you think is happening that's making it this tough right now? If they have a faith tradition, and I know that so many folks are either unchurched or dechurched, especially dechurched folks hurting, to ask them, do you have a faith tradition that helps you make sense of anxiety? Or when you were a little kid, did your grown-ups sing songs to you, hymns, or did they sing lullabies even, secular, that helped you to feel at ease or calm? Right? Hey, is there a song that you have on your playlist that is particularly meaningful to you, that could help you to shift from this anxiety into maybe a sense of more ease, or a sense of a kind of attentive energy rather than that vigilant, hyped up place?
Absolutely. So when you think about interventions for spiritual caregivers, you just named music, maybe as a way to shift somebody's focus when they're anxious. Are there other things that a spiritual caregiver could offer?
Yeah. So let's talk about a couple of different ones, right? This is called butterfly taps. And this has been used by international aid workers going into places that have been decimated by human and natural disasters. And this tapping, bilateral, rhythmic tapping, helps people to begin to reset their nervous systems, right? And so doing this and doing it with the service member, right? And what always makes me smile and puts me at ease is remembering how, with our nephew when he was an infant, right? Doing this hour after hour on his little back. Right?
I remember that as a mother with my children, Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. And you can listen, Bishop, you can help the person to focus. This is so rich, right? Because it's body-based, and you can say, hey, can you hear the taps? Can you feel the air that's coming up from, your your bicep to your hand. Can you feel that air? Just sense that, right? So butterfly taps. And some people are not going to want to do the butterfly taps if they're sitting in a meeting like this,
Right.
But you can do the same thing with tapping on your thighs. And no one needs to know, but it's very soothing. Yeah. And then there's something called 333, right? So chaplain might be sitting with somebody and even talking with the chaplain can see the person is anxious. Hey, would you be willing to do something with me, to try something with me? Let's take a couple of moments and become aware of breathing. And that your body is breathing. Because your breathing is your constant companion. It's there. It's always there.
And I think about the breath of God as well when we're breathing.
Ruah,
right, the Ruah.
Yeah. And so with 333, you get the person to focus for a few moments on their breathing. And then you go, okay, tell me 3 sounds you're currently hearing. And when you do that, please say, I hear, right? I hear. So 3 sounds. And then bring them back to their breath. Focus on that inhale. Focus on the exhale. Now tell me 3 things you're seeing in the room right now. Right? And focus back on an inhale and an exhale. Okay, how about 3 sensations that you're having? And some folks kind of, So you can say, well, sensations in your body, like is your stomach growling, right? Are your shoulders tight? Or where your body makes contact with the environment, So like, Bishop, right now, are you aware of your right hand on your table on the index cards, right? And that gives them an example, and then you have them name 3. So 333 brings them into the here and now.
So I hear, I see, and I feel.
Yeah, or I sense. I sense. Yeah. Also, humming and singing. It doesn't have to be, a trained professional. There is a nerve that connects our brains to our guts. And, our guts are an ancient nervous system. Okay? And so by activating this nerve, which is called the vagal nerve, you can actually affect some ease, right? And humming seems to do that. Singing seems to do that. Holding a note, right, seems to do that. So these are 3 quick and immediately handy things. And maybe some of your chaplains are already doing it with your folks.
Right. Yeah, and I imagine some of them are. Yeah. I know for myself, when I'm finding myself anxious, I love the Psalms. In another life, I was a cantor. And so those are things that I bring up and kind of sing to kind of get me centered again. How about prayer or meditation?
Yes. Yep. So helping people like praying word by word with the breathing, the Jesus prayer.
Could you demonstrate that for us?
Sure. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. And then beginning it again, right? For those of us who grew up Roman Catholic and have part of that heritage, right? Praying the Hail Mary can be a beautiful way of remembering and marking the movement of the first moments of the incarnation.
Oh, that is so beautiful. What a wonderful way to think of that prayer.
Yeah, and it's so scripturally based, right? And then what it also does is it brings us into awareness of now and at the hour of our death. Now and at the hour of our death. And that's not morbid. That's like, that shines a light on. So what's of ultimate importance here? what matters most.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. That's beautiful. So, as I think more about anxiety, sometimes it seems that anxiety can almost be fused with our identity. Yes. Could you talk about that a little bit, about diffusing anxiety from our sense of self?
Yes. Yeah. Anxiety is our attention and our thinking. And when it really trips us up, and this goes for depression, this goes for a whole host of other kinds of struggles. If my left hand is sense of self, represents sense of self, and my right hand is representing the anxiety, people really begin to suffer when these two become fused. Because then a person is so unable to say, chaplain, I have anxiety. I am anxious. I am anxious. I am anxiety. I had a patient walk in the other day and she sat down. She said, it's so bad. I am the anxiety. It's like, wow. Okay. So then we did like some 333 and some butterfly taps, right, just to center. But what's important is to help people. And this can happen through prayer. This can happen through saying, hey, wait a second. Our minds are thought manufacturing factories. And a thought is just a thought. Bishop, you are so much more than your thoughts. You're so much more than your feelings, than your experiences, than your sensations. So how can we put a little bit of space so that your sense of self, I am beloved of God, right? I am beloved of God. I'm a child of the universe for secular, right? How can that get separated from this stuff? And when there's that little space, wow, you see people's outlooks improve.
And how do you do that? How do you help them diffuse that? What, again, those techniques that you've talked about?
Those techniques, also, you can ask them, even right there sitting with you, you can ask them to write down, tell me what are some of the most frequent anxious thoughts you have. Just write them down, right? Okay. And I'm not making fun, but what I want us to do is I want us to read these first in our regular voice, and then like in a smartass kind of voice, a sarcastic voice. Let's make fun of these thoughts, right? And then read it like with a cartoonish kind of voice. Because what that does is it helps folks to begin to see, wait a second, first of all, I've put these thoughts down, right? They're not within me anymore. And like the mystics told us about this with journaling, right? And so they're here, and now I'm seeing them, and I've used agency to put them on paper, and now I'm going to play with them. We don't think about playing with anxiety.
No, not at all.
No, right?
It's so serious.
Especially more serious forms. Right. But when we can begin to find ways to laugh at it, and again, not making fun of it, not belittling it or dismissing it, but rather seeing it as these are thoughts and they come and go. You can say to someone, you know what, let's just sit here for a minute. And I'm going to track my thoughts over the next minute. And I want you to do the same, right? And then I want you to tell me how many different thoughts, we'll count them. You count them silently. How many thoughts have you had just in this minute? So that they begin to see these come and go. Just like feelings, they come and they go. Remember that song? I don't know if it was the Mamas and the Papas. I can remember it from being a little kid. And the darkest hour is just before dawn, right? And having folks hold on to that, right? You've seen it too when we've kept vigil with people who are dying, when we've kept vigil in the MICUs or the SICUs. There is something about getting through that literal and figurative dark night. And you get to recognize after a while, yep, the darkest hour is just before dawn. Hang in.
I see that particularly, my experience has been in hospice, when somebody is at the very end of their life, and that release when they do pass on.
Yes.
And it is almost a relief at that point. And knowing that they are now in the arms of God, who loves them, who created them and knew them even before they were born, which is just a remarkable feeling.
It's very sacred.
It is sacred. And I just think of that as release.
Yes.
And if those, taking those anxious thoughts and being able to release them from being diffused is really remarkable.
Yeah, and breathing out the thoughts and then breathing in like ease or calm. If you have somebody who is a believer, inhaling a sacred name, a sacred word.
Inhale love, exhale peace. I've used those kinds of exercises before with folks. And you can see somebody's demeanor change as they're doing that, which is lovely.
Yes.
Obviously, we're not, as spiritual caregivers, we're not mental health professionals. So when would you suggest that we refer, particularly when we think of impairment caused by anxiety and the severity of anxiety?
Yeah. So tapping into those two indicators, impairment, how much is this anxiety interfering with their duty, with their roles, their tasks, right? In the civilian world, we'd be thinking social, occupational, interpersonal, academic. Same thing with the military. And you can really hone it into, what is expected of them right now and how is that interfering, right? How's it showing up at home, or how's it showing up in the barracks?
Right. I was recently reading an article about drill instructors at Parris Island, and the anxiety around failing or not doing exactly what they're supposed to do, and how that was being manifest at home with snapping at children over the slightest thing. A candy wrapper's on the floor and you just totally lose it. Yes. Or overconsumption of alcohol at home to the point where you just fall down drunk. Those kinds of things. So when we ask questions, then that's when they really need to be referred to somebody with real training and skill in working with anxiety.
Yeah, especially when it's showing up in those kinds of outbursts, as well as, Bishop, when it's showing up in withdrawal, isolation. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I've seen that with folks getting isolated, and that leads to a host of other problems that we'll probably discuss in our next video. Well, is there anything else, Janine, that you'd like to add that you think would be helpful for our listeners today?
Yeah, the only other body-based thing I'd add, Bishop, is, sometimes, well, not sometimes, in Eastern psychologies and spiritualities, there's this saying that what the body does, the mind follows. What the body does, the mind follows. So somebody might come in and after, maybe they're like this or they're like this, right? And let them be for a while and then say, hey, would you be willing to do an experiment? I'm wondering, I'm not asking you to be at attention, right? But would you sit as tall and strong as you possibly can and drop your shoulders back and just lift your chin just a bit? And what are you noticing, right? Or imagine there's something at the top of your head and it's just elongating your torso, right? And feel your feet on the floor, grounding you. You'd be amazed at the kind of changes this can affect. Right. And when it does, then you can say to the person, you did that. You did that in less than 30 seconds.
It's really about paying attention to everything that's going on within you and what a change that can make. What's that expression? Fake it till you make it. And so
there's wisdom to that.
Yes,
yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, paying attention to paying attention.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for this podcast that you've done with us. I'm so grateful, and I'm hoping that our chaplains and all of our community spiritual caregivers have found this to be useful. God bless you all.